Good morning. I'm Emily Welch, and I'm pleased to serve on the amazing RE and standing committees. Welcome to First Church Unitarian in Littleton, Mass. We're so happy that you have joined us here at church this morning. A special welcome to any newcomers. We're glad that you have found us online and are with us today. Be sure to check Friday's Community Matters for upcoming events, including a new small group and upcoming meetings. And please join us for a virtual election night drop-in on Tuesday. For the link, you'll find it in Community Matters, and we will get through this pivotal election together. Please join me now in the spirit of worship. Welcome to church.
Good morning. My name is Molly Lozeau. I'm the music director at First Church Unitarian, and I'm happy to say that our prelude this morning was contributed by Carolyn McCreary. She recorded herself playing a song that she wanted to do for this service. It is Phantom of the Opera by Andrew Lloyd Webber, and I hope you enjoy.
All living substance, all substance of energy, being, and purpose are united and share the same destiny. All people, those we love and those we know not of, are united and share the same destiny. Birth to death, we share this unity with the sun, earth, our brothers, sisters, siblings, strangers, flowers of the field, snowflakes, volcanoes, and moonbeams. Birth, life, death, unknown, known, unknown. Our destiny, from unknown to unknown. May we have the faith to accept this mystery and build upon its everlasting truth. Let us enter the mystery. Let us worship. Now is the time in the service. If you have a chalice at home or a candle at home, you can get ready to light that, as we'll be led in lighting our chalice this morning by Linda Wells and Susan Palmer.
Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
All right, good morning. Welcome to First Church Unitarian here in Littleton, Massachusetts. My name is Lara Hoke, and I'm so glad that I am the minister of this amazing congregation. If you are finding us for the first time this morning, welcome. Glad you have found us on YouTube Live. Or if you're coming back, welcome back. Great to have you here with us virtually and someday together in person. But until then, we have this virtual space, and I, for one, enjoy it very much. So welcome. I have a few thank yous to start off with. I want to thank Susan Palmer in The Dinosaur and Linda Wells speaking the words of the covenant. Thank you so much for doing that. I want to thank Molly Lozeau for music this morning, as well as Carolyn McCreary. Thank you so much for that beautiful prelude. And thank you also to Carolyn and the Artemis singers for this morning's offertory. You'll hear that later. And to Doug for videoing that, Doug Sweetser. Thank you to Emily Welch for doing our Community Matters this morning and for telling our story later. Thank you to Hugh Vartanian, who is sharing our videos this morning and helping with tech should we need some help. It's November 1, Rabbit Rabbit. It begins a new theme in Soul Matters. And in Soul Matters, we are moving now to healing. And this morning, we're going to take, hopefully, a healing look at death and the afterlife. And finally, just a reminder, in case you didn't get the message during the gathering video, don't forget to vote this Tuesday if you haven't done so already. All right, I think with that, I will hand it over to Molly for our opening hymn, number 306.
Good morning again. Our opening hymn, as Reverend Laura said, is 306. You'll see the words on your screen. I'd say that this is a hymn that we don't sing very often, and you might not know it. I would say do your best to sing along. At least read through the words and listen to the words, because they have a very nice message for this morning.
Sing of living, sing of dying, let them both be joined in one, parts of an eternal
Thank you, Molly. And I wanted to mention also, it was great actually that Susan and Linda were in costume for our chalice lighting. Some of you might know that if we were in person, this Sunday is typically a multi-generational or whole church Sunday, and the kids would be with us upstairs the whole time, and a lot of people would be in costume. So it's a nice reminder of that. It's my pleasure now to introduce our Time for All Ages, led by Emily Welch, a wonderful standing committee member, as well as a wonderful member of the Religious Education Committee. Enjoy.
It's great to be with you this morning. I'm going to tell you the story of The Fall of Freddie the Leaf by Leo Buscalgia, adapted. Spring had passed, and so Freddie the Leaf had grown large. His midsection was wide and strong, and his 5 extensions were firm and pointed. He had first appeared in spring as a small sprout on a rather large branch near the top of a very tall tree. Freddie was surrounded by hundreds of other leaves, just like himself, or so it seemed. Soon he discovered that no 2 leaves were alike, even though they were on the same tree. Daniel, Freddie's best friend, he was the largest leaf on the limb and seemed to have been there before anyone else. It appeared to Freddie that Daniel was also the wisest among them. It was Daniel who told them that they were part of a tree. It was Daniel who explained that they were growing in a public park. It was Daniel who told them that the tree had strong roots which were hidden in the ground below. He explained that birds who came to sit on their branch and sing morning songs. He explained about the sun and the moon and the stars and the seasons. Freddie loved being a leaf. He loved his branch. He loved his light leafy friends, his place high in the sky, the wind that jostled about him, the sun rays that warmed him, the moon that covered him with soft white shadows. Summer had been especially nice. There were many people in the park that summer. They often came and sat under Freddie's tree. Daniel told him that giving shade was part of his purpose. "What's a purpose?" Freddie had asked. "A reason for being," Daniel had answered. "To make things more pleasant for others is a reason for being. To make shade for old people who come to escape the heat of their homes is a reason for being. To provide a cool place for children to come and play. These are all reasons for being." But Freddie's summer soon passed. It vanished on an October night. He had never felt it so cold. All the leaves shivered with the cold. They were coated with a thin layer of white, which quickly melted and left them dew-drenched and sparkling in the morning sun. Again, it was Daniel who explained that they experienced their first frost, the sign that it was fall, and that winter would be coming soon. Almost at once, the whole tree, in fact, the whole park, was transformed into a blaze of color. There was hardly a green leaf left. One became bright orange, another became blazing red. Daniel was deep purple, and Freddie was sort of a red and golden blue. How beautiful they all looked. Freddie and his friends had made their tree a rainbow. "Why did we turn different colors?" Freddie asked. "When we're all on the same tree?" Daniel said, "Each of us is different. We have different experience. We face the sun differently. We cast shade differently. Why should we not have different colors?" Daniel said matter-of-factly. Daniel told Freddie that this wonderful season was called fall. One day, a very strange thing happened. The same breezes that in the past had made them dance began to push and pull at their stems, almost as if it was angry. This caused some of the leaves to be torn from their branches and swept up in the wind and tossed about and dropped softly on the ground. All the leaves became frightened. "What's happening?" they asked in whispers, shouts. Daniel, of course, said, "It's what happens in fall.
It's the time for the leaves to change their home. Some people call it to die. We will all die? Freddie asked. Yes, Daniel answered, everything dies, no matter how big or small or weak or strong. We first do our job. We experience the sun and the moon and the wind and the rain. We learn to dance and to laugh, and then we die. I won't die, said Freddie with determination. Will you, Daniel? Yes, answered Daniel, when it's my time. When is that? Asked Freddie. No one knows for sure, Daniel responded. Freddie noticed that the other leaves continued to fall. He thought it must be their time. He saw that some of the leaves lashed back at the wind before they fell. Others simply let go and quietly dropped. Soon the tree was almost bare. I'm afraid to die, Freddie told Daniel. I don't know what's down there. We all fear what we don't know, Daniel said. It's natural, yet you were not afraid when summer became fall. Those were natural changes. Why should you be afraid of the season of death? Does the tree die too? Freddie asked. Well, someday, but there's something stronger than the tree. It is life. That lasts forever and ever, and we are all a part of life. Where will we go when we die? No one knows for sure. That is the great mystery, said Daniel. Will we return in the spring? Asked Freddie. We may not, but life will. Then what has been the reason for all of this, Freddie said. Why were we here at all if we have to fall and die? Daniel answered in the most matter-of-fact way he could. It's been about the sun and moon. It's been about happy times together. It's been about the shade and old people and children. It's been about all the colors in fall. It's been about seasons. Isn't that enough? That afternoon, in the golden light of dusk, Daniel let go. He fell effortlessly. He seemed to smile peacefully as he fell. Goodbye for now, Freddie, he said. Then Freddie was all alone, the only leaf on the branch. The first snow fell the following morning. It was soft and white and gentle, but it was bitter cold. There was hardly any sun that day, and the day was short. Freddie found himself losing his color and becoming brittle. It was constantly cold, and the snow weighed heavily upon him. At dawn, the wind came and took Freddie from his branch. It didn't hurt at all. He felt himself floating quietly and gently and softly downward. Fell. He saw the whole tree for the first time, how strong and firm it was. He was sure that it would live for a long time, and he knew that he had been part of its life and made him feel proud. Freddie landed on a clump of snow. It somehow felt warm and even very soft. In his new position, he was more comfortable than he'd ever been. His eyes closed and he fell asleep. He didn't know that spring would follow winter and that the snow would melt into water. He didn't know that what happened to be his useless, dried-up self would join with water and serve to make the tree stronger and become useful in a new way. Most of all, he did not know that there, asleep in the ground, in the tree, were already plans for new leaves in the spring. And that's our story.
All right. Thank you so much, Emily. That was great. That's our story, and we're sticking to it. So this is the time for our offering. First Church Unitarian is a self-supporting congregation, and we rely on the generosity of our friends and members to keep going, to keep offering our ministries, both to members and friends and to the larger community. So if you'd like to make an offering donation this morning or to send in a pledge, you see here the address for the mail and our website address as well. If you go to the website, you'll see a yellow donate button, and it will explain all the ins and outs of donating online if you choose to do that. So this morning's offering will now be given and received in grateful appreciation.
I'm happy to say that our offertory song for today has been contributed by the Artemis singers, who are led by Carolyn McCreary, who you heard earlier for the Prelude today. They are performing the Witch's Song, and you'll see the details of who's performing and who created the video on the first screen.
Isis Artabiana, Hecatodomita Kali, Unana. Isis Artabiana, Hecatodomita Kali, Unana.
Who were the witches? Where did they come from? Maybe your great-great-grandmother was one. Witches were wise, wise women, they say. And there's a little witch in every woman today. There's a little witch in every woman today.
Witches knew all about flowers and trees, how to use all the roots and the barks and the leaves. People grew weary from hard work and days. Witches made them feel better in so many ways.
Who were the witches? Where did they come from? Where did your great-great-grandmother was one? Witches were wise, wise women, they say. And there's a little witch in every woman today. There's a little witch in every woman today. Where did they come from? Maybe your great-great-grandmother was one. Witches were wise, wise women, they say. And there's a little witch in every woman today. There's a little witch in every woman today. Some people thought that the witches were bad. Some people were scared of the power they had. But power to heal and to help and to care isn't something to fear, it's a treasure to share. Who were the witches? Where did they come from? Maybe your great-great-grandmother was one. Witches were wise, wise women, they say. And there's a little witch in every woman today. There's a little witch in every woman today.
So there they are, the Artemis singers who were able to make it and record that song. You can see them there, and Doug's recording equipment. So thank you so much to the Artemis singers. Let me change my background now. All right. So this is the time of year when many trees and other plants are in transition. They're going from that vibrant state of the spring and summer and moving through the autumn into the death-like barren season of winter. It's also a time of the year for thinking about death, human death, and what happens after we die. Yesterday, of course, was Halloween, and there is a Celtic pagan holiday, Samhain, which began yesterday and into today. Today starts the Mexican holiday of Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead, which coincides with two Christian holidays. We have the All Saints' Day today and All Souls' Day tomorrow. So lots of different traditions and cultures recognize this time of year, and that this is what we might call a liminal time, a time to think about the changing from one state to the other, to think about the cusp or the threshold or the transition between one time and the next. According to some traditions, the veil between this life and whatever comes after this life is very thin during this liminal time of year. This invites spirits, according to these traditions. It invites visits from spirits and from those who have died. And during this liminal time of year, it seems very natural to pause and consider the afterlife. Is there an afterlife? Is there a heaven or hell? Is there reincarnation? Is there anything to us beyond the physical machine of our body and brain? Now, last week, we considered our deepest inner voice, what the Friends or the Quakers call the inner light, what the Hindus and the mystical tradition of Hinduism, Vedanta, call Atman, and what our Unitarian forebear Ralph Waldo Emerson created from borrowing from those traditions and called the Oversoul. I don't know if you believe in any of these concepts that we talked about last week, or in an essence or a soul that is beyond body and brain. But obviously, lots of different religions and many different regions of the world and many different eras of time have had that intuition that we do. Now, science has not really proven any such thing. You might have seen or heard of the 2003 movie 21 Grams, which popularized or repopularized the idea that the human body weighs 21 grams less right after death, allegedly proving that we have a soul, which would therefore weigh 21 grams. But this idea is based on a flawed series of experiments done in the early 1900s by Dr. Duncan McDougall, a physician from Haverhill, Massachusetts, actually, not so far from here. Science and physics have not been able to prove that there is a soul or an essence. And so it remains the domain of metaphysics and theology and theology. As a rule, the Eastern religious traditions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, and others, believe in reincarnation. Most varieties of Western religions have a concept of heaven and hell. Christianity and Islam emphasize it far more than Judaism does. Our Unitarian forebears tended to not to emphasize heaven or hell or the afterlife. Emerson didn't necessarily reject the idea of an afterlife, but he wasn't focused on it. He was more focused on living well in this life. Some of his writings, though, do suggest something closer, perhaps, to the idea of reincarnation. For instance, Emerson wrote, "The soul comes from without into the human body, as into a temporary abode, and it goes out of it anew as it passes into other habitations." He also wrote, "It is the secret of the world that all things subsist and do not die, but only retire a little from sight, and afterwards return again." Emerson wrote, "Nothing is dead. Men feign themselves dead and endure mock funerals. And there they stand looking out of the window, sound and well, in some strange new disguise." Words of Ralph Waldo Emerson. You might or might not believe that there's anything to this and to what I talked about last week. You might or might not believe that we have some essence beyond the machine of our body. You might or might not believe that something happens to that essence after the body dies. We, as Unitarian Universalists, tend to be the doubting Thomases of the religious world. We want to see before we believe. We want science to prove things as much as possible. And so there is no agreed upon notion of an afterlife in Unitarian Universalism. It's always seemed strange to me that most of us, most people, really rarely talk about death or what the afterlife might be. After all, it is the only thing we know for certain about our future. Only our death is absolutely certain. There is no loophole that allows us to avoid death. Nothing we know of. Impermanence seems to be at the core of life on this planet, and as far as we can see in the universe. Nothing that is material can last in its current form forever. Not inanimate objects, and certainly not us living creatures. The planet itself will eventually die in spite of our best efforts at ecological care, because after all, our sun will eventually die. And this is a strange and difficult reality to accept. But to quote from my favorite poet, Audre Lorde, we were never meant to survive. And so today I want to think with you a bit about this and from a Unitarian Universalist, modern UU perspective. I think Unitarian Universalism has as much to offer in thinking about the afterlife as any other religion. To our credit, I believe, we do not offer a false certainty, but we do still provide some hopeful traditions and potentially healing ways of thinking about death and the afterlife. I've come to believe that our tradition offers a hopeful agnosticism toward the afterlife. And the room for that hope can make a difference for some of us. As I mentioned earlier, Emerson and many Unitarian thinkers of his time really thought that heaven and hell were mostly to be found in this lifetime. They didn't think all that much about an afterlife. Like many modern Unitarian Universalists, these 19th century Unitarians saw the finality of death as a compelling reason to live life as fully as possible. The hope there is that after a life well lived, one will live on in the minds and hearts of those persons whose lives they enriched. But in considering a Unitarian Universalist view of the afterlife, we shouldn't forget the gentle Universalists. Unlike the Unitarians, the Universalists were definitely focused in the beginning on the afterlife. They were focused on the idea of universal salvation, thus the name. They believed in a heaven, and they believed that no one would go to hell, or at least not eternally, right? They believed that ultimately everyone would wind up in heaven. If Unitarians are our hyper-intellectual half, the Universalists are probably our hyper-hopeful, hyper-loving half. So where is that influence of universalism to be found in modern Unitarian Universalism's view of the afterlife? I would argue it can be found in at least two ways. First, I think that most Unitarian Universalists today, that there is a universal afterlife. They just don't know exactly what that is. What I mean is, they would believe that all humans share a universal fate. We all die, we know that. But I believe you'd be hard-pressed to find a Unitarian Universalist today who believes that we as Unitarian Universalists are entitled to a particular, perhaps more special afterlife, while non-Unitarian Universalists are condemned to suffer, or at least condemned to an inferior version of an afterlife. And when you think about it, that's an interesting modern version of universalism. Many religions believe that their own members will either be the only ones to achieve heaven or salvation, or that they'll be the only ones to achieve the highest level of it in any case. I personally haven't met a modern Unitarian Universalist who believes that we as a group are entitled to anything more or less in the afterlife than anyone else, just because of our faith tradition. So that's one thing. The second influence of universalism that I would point to is the openness to the possibility that there is perhaps some type of life after death, something more than our ashes returning to the earth while our memories linger on with loved ones. For me, at least, there is a lot of hope to be found in this openness to mysticism, this openness that not only don't we know what the afterlife is, but also equally that we cannot say what it isn't with absolute certainty. And of course, the influence of universalism tends to make us have hope that this unknown possible afterlife is, at least at a minimum, benign. Our universalist half has never doubted that the universe was ultimately a friendly place. When you consider the Unitarian Transcendentalists' openness to Eastern religion and mysticism, and add to that the Universalism's idea that there is an afterlife, I believe it starts to account for a trend that I at least see in modern Unitarian Universalism, was some openness to the idea of reincarnation. That is to say, I personally have met more modern Unitarian Universalists who are open to the possibility of reincarnation than are open to the idea of a heaven or a paradise awaiting us when we die. That's anecdotal, but that's been my experience. Even for those of us who do not believe in reincarnation, there is still an Eastern mystical influence on our thinking about a possible afterlife. Some Unitarian Universalists would agree with Eastern traditions, including Buddhism and Hinduism, that we suffer because of the illusion that each of us is a separate being with individual needs. That is, if we could see ultimate reality, if we could really see and easily experience with our senses the interdependent web of all existence, as we say in our seventh principle, and if we could really see and easily experience the oneness of all things, we would not now suffer as we do, trapped in these human bodies, trapped in our individual consciousnesses. If you think of it this way, then being released from our individual earthly bodies is a possible pathway to freedom from suffering, maybe even to bliss. For some modern Unitarian Universalists, this bliss that is hoped for after we die is the possibility of achieving cosmic consciousness, sometimes called Buddha consciousness, Krishna consciousness, Christ consciousness. Some modern Unitarian Universalists think that cosmic consciousness is to be achieved in this lifetime through meditation and enlightenment while alive. I personally doubt that it's possible to achieve what I think of as cosmic consciousness in this lifetime while stuck in these bodies and these brains. They're awfully confining and limited, these bodies and brains. But I personally have hope that after we die, maybe we do achieve something like this concept, cosmic consciousness, call it what you will, that maybe by leaving our bodies, perhaps we have hope for merging with and understanding the great mystery at a level that we cannot possibly articulate in the present while alive in this form. I certainly don't know that this is true, but my hopeful agnosticism allows that it is one possibility. Does this openness to an afterlife sound like bunk to you? Does it fly in the face of science? Maybe, maybe not, I don't know. Modern physics and cosmology has put forward, for instance, a well-regarded theory, I'm sure many of you know it, called string theory, And this theory claims that there are more than the 3 spatial dimensions that we can detect directly with our senses, and that in fact there are 11 dimensions, not 3. Now, I'm no physicist, and I certainly couldn't explain string theory to you very well, but I do believe, point being, that there's still a lot more that we don't know than that we do know. The idea of cosmic consciousness isn't as counterintuitive to me personally as what the greatest minds in physics proved 100 years ago with quantum mechanics. And so that's how I feel about an openness, an agnosticism about the afterlife. So I'd like to close with words by Lee Hubert. Lighting a candle is somewhat like the beginning of life. If that is true, then perhaps extinguishing a candle is something like the ending of life. But death may not be the end of us. We live on in the memories of friends and loved ones. The influence we possessed in life works on, moving persons or causes forward. Let us not forget that most candles have more than one life, and so perhaps may we. Blessed be, and amen. I'd now like to invite Molly to introduce our closing hymn, number 101.
Again, you'll see the words on your screen and you'll be able to sing along as you will or listen. I wanted to point out that it's an interesting choice that we have this hymn in our hymnals because it also appears in many other hymnals in many different faith traditions. But I think the words that we have and the words that appear in other editions as well ring true to whatever you believe. You can make it personal and you can make it meaningful to you.
Friends, it's time for our closing words. Again, if we were in person, you would be with me here in this sanctuary, and we would form something like a circle and hold hands. For now, I invite you, if there's someone with you and you can safely hold hands, to do that. Otherwise, if you are alone in the room, as I am here in the sanctuary, I invite you to put your own hands together and feel that warmth as we hear these closing words. Unknown to known to unknown. That is the path that we follow in our experience as humans, from birth to our life to our death. We do not know what follows this life. We do not know if there is an afterlife in any way that involves us as individual entities. We do know that we are a part of the oneness of all things, that we are a part of this beautiful cosmos, this vast universe. We know that we will always be a part of that space-time. May we do all we can to live a good and meaningful life of purpose and helping others, so that those who follow us in this human experience will remember us well, and so that we know we will have done our part to make our beautiful planet the best it could be. May we embrace the great mystery and the possibilities. Blessed be, and amen.
Our postlude today was written by Frédéric Chopin. It's an excerpt from one of his sonatas for piano. It's a sonata in B-flat major. It has 4 movements. This is part of the 3rd movement. And I included it today because you'll hear a very familiar tune, I think, right when it starts. It's commonly called the Funeral March Sonata. This little tune has been used in countless other songs and videos and like cartoons and things like that. So you might recognize it. But what I really like about this particular piece is not that funeral march section, but what comes in the middle of all of that. It's this beautiful soaring melody that only Chopin could write. And I think it offers hope and beautifulness and grace. And I invite you to enjoy it and listen to it and think about other sides of death and moving on and passing away, other than the sad, harder edges of it.